What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode, and should be the final episode of this 1.5J build. So first thing I did this morning was put Todd's spigot bearing in. So this pilot is actually for a 2J2 T56. So that came out of his old crank, which we're using. That's apparently fairly new. So in case you haven't sort of noticed, although that Todd's spent a lot of money putting expensive parts in this bottom end, it is very much still pretty much a budget build. So trying to get away with reusing whatever we can, and that's why he's only paying me to get, you know, the bottom end together and the head reassembled, and then he's going to take the rest of it from there. So he is trying to do it with as little cost as possible, but still obviously trying to get that that end result of having that really nicely high power rated engine for him. So anyway, as you saw in the last episode, I've done my ring gaps. We've done all the Welsh plugs, everything in the blocks pretty much sorted and ready to go. All that's left to do is to finish up those rod bearings, get them to where I'm happy with them. Then it's just a matter of get the crank in, set the thrust, get the thrust to where I'm happy with it, and then we can put the rest of it all together. And that's pretty much going to be the end of our involvement with what we're doing. From there, Todd's going to take it and finish off doing the rest of it pretty much. So let's go with it. Let's get it done. Alright, so I've got an absolutely perfect 6th thou of end float, so I don't have to touch the thrust bearings at all, which is absolutely awesome. Perfect. So now it's just a matter of smashing all the rest of the mains on, and then we'll flip it over and start getting our rings on our pistons and get our big boys in there. guys, I just thought I'd quickly pause to explain something that's very important, particularly with JZ engines, or more specifically JZ oil pumps. So your front main seal obviously sits in the front of the oil pump like most engines, but with the JZs you can see this oil hole here. Now this is the oil return back to the sump for pretty much the front of the pump. Obviously, as you can see, oil can escape from the front of the gear down back into the sump where it belongs. So it's very important that that drains there. Now if you hit these seals too far back, you can actually cover that hole quite a bit. And the issue that this causes is that with the oil has nowhere to go from the front of the gear, nowhere to drain back to, eventually it's just going to build up and push out the front of the seal. So 9 times out of 10, if you put a fresh motor together and you have a front main seal leak, this is what you'll find when you pull the motor down. You'll find that someone's hit the main seal too far back and it's covered most of that hole. With RBs, it's not as bad because RBs actually have a much bigger lip which seats the seal, and part of the hole is actually milled into the lip. So even if you hit the seal all the way back to its sort of lip where it seats, there's still actually most of that hole exposed for it to drain. So it's not as prominent in RBs, but as you can see with JZs, the way that sits in front there, it's a very important thing with JZs. So all we do is just knock them back until they're flush with the front of the pump housing, and that's usually where they sit there with the flush with the front, and no issues usually. That's usually fine. So that's just one for new players that I thought I'd explain while I've got this here and can show you. But anyway, get the rest of this pump together. Alright guys, so here we have our 1J head back finally. It's been a long wait to get some replacement valves. So, the story was that Todd had those 2 valves that he got to replace the 2 ones that were bent, and I sent it down to the machine shop with those 2 new valves. Now, it turned out that those valves were actually not the right valves, they were wrong. They're a different size, they're a little bit taller, which wasn't right. Also, those 2 guides were smashed, and we needed to get 2 new guides. Now the machine shop couldn't source any new guides that were exactly correct. So like many other things that Todd was getting, he insisted on trying to source some from overseas that he could get genuine Toyota stuff pretty cheap. So he tried to do that, and I don't know, there was some hold up, something or other happened. But we were pretty much waiting for ages for guides and the right valves and stuff like that. Again, I don't remember what happened. I sort of just let Todd take it, and he was dealing with the machine shop and trying to get these parts to them and stuff, because you know, as much as I'm happy for him to do what he needed to do to source it cheap, I didn't want to have to, you know, deal with it. I've got a lot of other stuff on. So whatever ended up happening, Todd ended up getting the right valves to them, and they ended up sourcing some guides which they're going to work, but they're just a little bit short of the guides. The other thing was that when they actually started doing the valve service, they found that the 2 exhaust valves in that cylinder had also been touched. So we had to get 2 new exhaust valves for that cylinder as well. So that cylinder's got all new valves and 2 new intake guides, but the rest of the guides were all fine. They didn't need replacing, so it doesn't have all new guides, just those 2 that were smashed have been replaced. So we finally got it back. It was then skimmed, and we had the oil drain modification done, which is to suit the 2J. So that's a pretty common thing with the 1J, something that sort of has to be done when you go on 1.5. This is a 2J head gasket. I think I showed you guys this earlier in this build in like the first episode, but as you can see now, that actually lines up, and there's actually quite a lot of meat there to for the head gasket to clamp down on the head there. Whereas when you leave the oil feed on the 1J head in the 1J orientation, I guess you'd call it, as it's suited to a 1J, it does work, but you end up with only like just over 1 mil of actual head gasket surface area on the outside of the oil feed hole, which is, you know, not exactly what you want when you're doing a big high horsepower build like this. So anyway, head's sorted. At this stage, my involvement in it from here is to put the new valve stem seals in and reassemble the springs, locks, springs, retainers and locks, and basically have the head reassembled, cams still out, so that Todd can put the head on the block himself and do what he's got to do. So that's the job for tonight. So first thing I'm going to do is chuck a spark plug in cylinder 1 and CC the head, or cylinder 6, I think it's cylinder 6, whatever, this one here, and CC the head so I can actually work out exactly what the compression ratio is going to be, depending on what head gasket Todd uses, which I'd assume would be just a 50 thou. Anyway, I'll CC the head first, and then from there we'll start assembling with our nice shiny boy springs and retainers and locks, and got our new valve stem seals over there, so we'll be good to go. So that's pretty much going to be my involvement in this engine build from here, is essentially how we've got it here. Bottom end assembled, everything done, and just have the head assembled with the springs and stuff, and from there Todd's going to take the wheel, and Todd will sort of finish it off, the sump, put the head on, do the timing, everything else. So trusting Todd to do that. Again, it's one of those things where even though it's not really a budget build, Todd's a pretty good mate, and I've been trying to help him out as much as I can with this build, trying to get it done as cheap as he can. But anyway, I am freaking keen to see some results out of this thing. I think it's going to be awesome with that 4294. It's going to be guys, so the SD card on the camera filled up last night, so it was too late for me to bother trying to wipe it and sort it out. I just finished putting the valves in. So we've got our head assembled as far as valves, locks, springs, retainers, everything goes, which is awesome. So we're at this point. From here, next thing is to actually chuck the cams in and check all the shims on the lifters. So because we've actually had the valves serviced, so they've had to lap or grind the valve seats. The actual seats in this head were quite good, they weren't too bad, so I'm hoping that they've just sort of done a bit of a lap. I'm hoping that the shims are still pretty well on point. I'm hoping that they haven't actually cut the valves in the seats too much to the point where we need to reshim it. But nonetheless, it's something that has to be fixed. I'm kind of counting on the fact that it doesn't have to be fixed because Todd's coming to get this tonight. So anyway, I'll chuck them in and check. and we'll go from there. But I'm hoping they're going to be okay. All right, guys. So I was very, very wrong, and that turned into a very long morning of me measuring all of the clearances and then measuring all of the shims and then working out exactly what shims Todd's going to have to get. So Todd's got a mate that set up this head last time. Obviously he already had the cams and stuff in the motor that blew up, so the head has been done before the motor went kaput. So the bloke who did the head last time, he's got his clearances that he did the head to. So I've told Todd that I'd just work out for him exactly what shims he needs where to get back to those tolerances, and then Todd can actually get the shims off that same bloke, and then he's got feeler gauges at home. Like I said, Todd's a pretty switched on bloke. That's why I'm trusting him enough to take just the long block and the head and finish putting it together himself. But that's one thing he's gonna have to sort out from here. So I did mark them all up and worked out what sizes he's going to need to get back to his clearances that he is aiming for, which has taken quite a while. It is a long process, but it's got to be done. But yeah, there were a few of them that were really quite tight, so there must have been a few valves that actually they needed to do a fair bit of work to. So it is what it is, just all part of the game. But anyway, finally, that's pretty much this motor done. At this point, chuck all the cam caps back on. I'll leave the cams out so Todd can sort that out. Obviously, J's aren't like RBs where you have the luxury of getting the head onto the block with the cams installed. J's are a bit different. They're also a bit of a pain for anyone. I've been able to show you this because I'm not putting it on the motor. But for anyone who's ever putting studs in a J, if you're ever doing it, a trick for new players, you got to make sure you actually sit the washer in on the head first, because the washer actually doesn't fit through this gap here. So you can't actually just put the stud through and have it in there, or if you're the sort of person that either installs the head on the block and then puts the stud in through the top, you then can't get the washer on because you can't get it over the stud and through this gap. Or if you're the sort of person that installs all the studs on the block and then sits the head on top, it's the same issue. Once the head's on there and the stud's coming through the hole, you actually can't get a washer onto it. So you have to make sure you actually sit all of the washers in these positions before you go putting the head on, or putting the studs in if you're the sort of person that puts the heads on first and then puts the stud in. So either way is fine, but yeah, just a trick for new players. You got to make sure that the washers are already in the head. Adam made that mistake when he put his head on. I learned that the hard way. But anyway, so that's pretty much this thing ready to go for Todd when he picks it up this afternoon. So I'll film a bit of a segment when he gets here for the outro. But yeah, it's been a long process, long time waiting for parts, but Todd's done pretty well for himself about getting out of this pretty cheap. But yeah, like I said, I don't think I'll do another motor like this for anyone. We're just too busy to have this sort of stuff in the engine room. Like I said, it's one of those things, if Todd had come to me and he wasn't my friend and he was just another customer and he was like, I want to build this motor, I want to make this much power, I would have just been like, well, this is what we're going to do with what you've got and this is how much it's going to cost. Yeah, that's how we're going to do it. But because it's Todd, allowed him to sort of get stuff himself as cheap as he could, which meant a lot of wait time for us. Not only that, but don't forget, we did actually donate this block to him because his block had the cracks all around the deck. So, you know, mate, like I said, it's all right, he's mate and that's fine, but it's been just another one of those learning curves where we're too busy and the engine room's not big enough to allow us to do that sort of thing. So anyway, it's been great fun. It's going to be a good engine. Looking forward to seeing some results. And yeah, we'll tune in when Todd gets here. All right, guys, so it's the next day now. I absolutely forgot to film anything while Todd was here. We actually ended up just talking smack for like literally 3 hours. I didn't get home till like 8 o'clock because we were just talking crap the whole time. But anyway, he's absolutely stoked. He can't wait to get his motor in the car and get it running. I can't wait to see it in the motor in the car and running, so that's awesome. We've had gone, we had a big old clean up today in the engine room. Look at all this room we got. Finally got a place to hang our AN spinner, so they've got a home and stuff. So done a big clean up this morning. Managed to get the next J build in here. So this is actually a 1J GTE. Again, full billet mains. This one's getting H-beams and 4Gs, which is all this stuff here. Upgraded wrist pins. Almost the same as Todd's, except this is only a 1J and it's only getting H-beams, but still, that's going to be the next J build to be underway in here. So be excited for that. That's for the crust eater for Muff Garage. Doing a nice spicy auto big power 1J for his crust eater. So look forward to that. That's coming soon. But anyway, just thought I'd sign off considering I totally forgot to film anything with Todd. My bad. But yeah, hopefully once he gets it sort of in the car and sorted, I can get some footage of it actually happening. Like I said, Rob Novak is going to be tuning that car, so I'm pretty excited for him to be doing it. It's very capable hands. Once again, it's another one of those things, guys, where we're not out to poach anyone. Todd already had a really good relationship with Rob. Rob did a lot of Todd's tuning for the whole life of that car, and Todd's happy to go to Rob, and he's closer to where he is down there as well. So that all makes sense, and we're very happy to do that. Just happy to have built him a really tough motor, so keen to see some results out of things. So hopefully I'll be able to show you some on YouTube, but until then, thanks for watching. Smash the like, smash subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace out, see you, bye.